Haribol, Namaste. My name is Janapati Das, and welcome again to another Krishna book reading. Please accept my respects. Let me offer my respectful obeisances to my Guru Dev and to my spiritual grandfather Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We will start off today with the kirtan, hearing and chanting of Krishna's most holy names, which is the prime benediction for humanity. There are so many things that go on in the world every day, so much suffering, some that's known, some that's unknown, and sometimes we feel very helpless about what we can do or how we can stop such intense suffering from happening. The best thing to do is to help people understand their true identity as spiritual entities. This will enable us to live in a peaceful world, peacefully, not eternally, of course, and there will always be things that go on, but at least with an understanding that when our time comes up in the end of this life, that we will continue on because we are Krishna's dear beloved children and spirit souls. So the prime benediction for humanity is to give people the names of Krishna to hear and to sing and repeat, so that we can know who we are. We can understand our true identity and act upon that platform as true servants of Krishna. And this idea of loving service to God is a natural tendency that we have that's been covered over by our enviousness of God and our desire to control and enjoy as the controller. But the true happiness, the true natural state of happiness is to be loving servants of Krishna. And this can be realized and understood by applying the process of kirtan as laid out by Lord Chaitanya as the means to achieve self-realization in this life. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my guitar and we will chant Krishna's names. So please join along. I get my capo to stay on, right? Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Okay, hi Bob. Welcome. And as you recall, our last few videos was quite a few, more than a few videos, but a few chapters of the Krishna book were about the famous rasa dance between the gopis of Vrindavan and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it was a beautiful, beautiful description, and there's a lot of that. If you haven't heard that yet, go back in my videos on my YouTube channel. Please feel free to listen to that again, and or read it in your book. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are at a new chapter now in the Krishna book. And really only 1/3 through the Krishna book still. So there's a lot of wonderful stories still to come. So this is called Vidyadhara Liberated and the demon Sankhasura killed. Once upon a time, the coward men of Vrindavan, headed by Nanda Maharaj, desired to go to Ambikavana to perform the Shivaratri performance. The Rasa Leela was performed during the autumn, and after that, the next big ceremony is Holi, or the Dola Yatra ceremony. Between the Dola Yatra ceremony and the Rasa Leela ceremony, there is one important ceremony which is called Shivaratri, which is especially observed by Shaivites, or devotees of Lord Shiva. But sometimes the Vaishnavas also observe this ceremony because they accept Lord Shiva as the foremost Vaishnava. So it's very important to understand when we're talking about demigods and the very chief demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma. It's not that because Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the only one God, that we don't have devotees of Krishna. They're referred to as demigod, but a demigod is not, technically speaking, a god. It is actually a very empowered living entity. In other words, the positions of Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma are not actual like people. Like Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is Sri Krishna. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Indra, these are all actual positions within the universe, so that the living entity who takes on the body of the Lord Brahma or a Lord Indra or a Lord Shiva is actually, they are actual living entities who are empowered. They're very powerful living entities, given to be able to create a whole universe, or someone like Lord Shiva. But they are posts, and it actually said in the scriptures that if a living entity is almost a pure devotee, but has a slight desire to be a controller, like a creator or whatnot, they can take on the position. They would be awarded the position of Lord Brahma, which is a long life. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, it's a very heavenly. They live in Brahma Loka is the highest heavenly planets. A very, very wonderful, beautiful place. Lots of enjoyment, whatnot, etc., etc. But it's very close to the spiritual world, but it's not in the spiritual world, in other words. So, but also it's said in the scripture sometimes that if there's not a qualified living entity at the end of the life of the Lord Brahma, and remember from our stories, there are more than one Lord Brahma positions. There are innumerable universes with extreme complexities, and each of them have a creator. Some of the creators are have a lot of heads. Lord Brahma in our universe has 4 heads. So these are all positions, right? They're positions. And Lord Brahma himself also in this universe, he got a little puffed up with the story where he stole the cowherd boys and cows, and Krishna just put him in the right place. It wasn't very offensive, but it was just, kind of arrogant. He thought, oh, I'm Lord Brahma, but then he realized that there are so many Lord Brahmas, and they're all servants of Krishna. So, we offer our respects to Lord Shiva, and all the demigods, all these empowered living entities. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, it's foolish to worship them as God, which some people do, but we should offer them our respectful obeisances as we would our spiritual master, because they are our spiritual masters. They're all devotees of Krishna. They're very elevated devotees of Krishna. We serve them in the sense of with the fact that we're all serving Krishna. In other words, if we offer our respects to these great elevated souls who are dear servants of Krishna, and we act according to it. So we're not offensive to the demigods. In fact, it's very bad to be offensive to a devotee of Krishna like that. So, by the function of Shivaratri is not observed very regularly by bhaktas or devotees of Krishna. Under the circumstances, it is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam that the coward men headed by Nanda Maharaj once upon a time desired, which means that they were not regularly observing the Shivaratri function, but that once upon a time they wanted to go to Ambikavana out of curiosity. Ambikavana is situated somewhere in the Gujarat province. Ambikavana is said to be situated on the river Saraswati, yet we do not find any Saraswati river in the Gujarat province. The only river there is Sabarmati. In India, all the big places of pilgrimage are situated on nice rivers like the Ganges, Jamuna, Saraswati, Narmada, Godavari, Kaveri, etc. Ambikavana was situated on the bank of Saraswati, and all the coward men and Nanda Maharaj went there. They very devotedly began to worship the deity of Lord Shiva and Ambika. That's, Sita, the wife of Lord Shiva. It's also Durga. It is great practice that whenever there's a temple of Lord Shiva, there must be another temple of Ambika or Durga, because Ambika is the wife of Lord Shiva and is the most exalted of chaste women. So similarly, we offer our respects to Goddess Durga, because Goddess Durga is a servant of Krishna. We don't serve Goddess Durga. In other words, we see lots of situations where the devotees of Krishna will pray to Durga, as is fashioned in India to pray to Goddess Durga to get a good husband or material wealth. But the women like Radhika and the different gopis prayed to Goddess Durga, to Goddess Katyani, different names of her, Goddess Durga, to have Krishna as their husband. So you can't fault the devotees for wanting to have Krishna as their dearmost husband. They're praying for a transcendental thing. She doesn't live outside the association of her husband. After reaching Ambikavana, the coward men of Vrindavan first bathe themselves in the river Saraswati. If one goes to a place of pilgrimage, his first duty is to take a bath and sometimes to shave his head. That is the first business. After taking bath, they worshiped the deities and then distributed charity in the holy places. According to the Vedic system, charity is given to the Brahmanas. It is stated in the Vedic Shastras that only the Brahmanas and the sannyasis can accept charity. The coward men from Vrindavan gave cows decorated with golden ornaments and beautiful garlands. The Brahmanas are given charity because they are not engaged in any business profession. They are supposed to be engaged in Brahminical occupations as described in the Bhagavad Gita, namely, they must be very learned and must perform austerity and penances. They must not only themselves be learned, but they must also teach others. And in this day of Kali, unfortunately, the Brahmanas have sort of, there are not too many Brahmanas who are true devotees of Krishna and not polluted. It's most things in the age of Kali Yuga, it goes downhill. This is also another thing that's gone downhill. Brahmanas are not meant to be Brahmanas only. They should create other Brahmanas also. If a man is found who agrees to become a Brahmana's disciples, he is also given the chance to become a Brahmana. The Brahmana is always engaged in the worship of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, the Brahmanas are eligible to accept all kinds of charity. But if the Brahmanas receive excessive charity, they are to distribute it for service of Vishnu. In the Vedic scripture, therefore, one is recommended to give in charity to the Brahmanas, and by doing so, one pleases Lord Vishnu and all the demigods. So in the Vedic system, traditionally, the Brahmanas were the spiritual masters of the society. They did not work. They weren't laborers like the lower castes, like the Shudras or the Vaishyas or even the Kshatriyas. But there was a hierarchy that was set into place in the Vedas, according to Krishna, to basically maintain society in a spiritual way. The Brahmanas were to be supported, and they were to give out spiritual wealth, in other words, spiritual knowledge to the different castes and the kings and the Vaishyas. And the Kshatriyas were to be basically support the Brahmanas that way. People were to give the Brahmanas wealth, and the wealth, if it was excessive, it would go back into society. But of course, through Kali Yuga, this is, you get very lustful, and Brahmanas being living in a very wealthy situation while other parts of society are suffering. But that's not really what it originally was supposed to be like. But with the age of Kali Yuga, things get deteriorated. In the Vedic scripture, therefore, one is recommended to give in charity to the Brahmanas, and by so doing, one pleases Lord Vishnu and all the demigods. The pilgrims take bath, worship the deity, and give in charity. They are also recommended to fast one day. They should go to a place of pilgrimage and stay there at least for 3 days. The first day is spent fasting, and at night they can drink a little water because water does not break the fast. The cowherd men, headed by Nanda Maharaj, spent that night at the bank of the Saraswati. They fasted all day and drank a little water at night, but while they were taking their rest, a great serpent from the nearby forest appeared before them and hungrily began to swallow up Nanda Maharaj. Nanda began to cry helplessly, "My dear son Krishna, please come and save me from this danger. This serpent is swallowing me." When Nanda Maharaj cried for help, all the cowherd men got up and saw what was happening. They immediately took up burning logs and began to beat the snake to kill it. But in spite of being beaten with burning logs, the serpent was not about to give up swallowing Nanda Maharaj. At this time, Krishna appeared on the scene and touched the serpent with his lotus feet. Immediately upon being touched by the lotus feet of Krishna, the serpent shed its reptilian body and appeared as a very beautiful demigod named Vidyadhara. His bodily features were so beautiful that he appeared to be worshipable. There was a luster and effulgence emanating from his body, and he was garlanded with a gold necklace. He offered obeisances to Lord Krishna and stood before him with great humility. Krishna then asked the demigod, "You appear to be a nice demigod, to be favored by the goddess of fortune. How is it that you perform such abominable activities, and how did you get the body of a serpent?" The demigod began to narrate the story of his previous life. So it's not like Krishna doesn't know this situation, like most situations, like the two demigods, Nalakubara and Manigriva, who were in the bodies of trees. There was a story behind that. Krishna knew about it. He was aware of it, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but for the benefit of all the devotees, he asked this question, and the story is thus told. "My dear Lord," he said, "in my previous life I was named Vidyadhara, and was known all over the world for my beauty, but because I was a celebrated personality, I used to travel all over in my airplane. While traveling, I saw a great sage named Angira. He was very ugly, and because I was very proud of my beauty, I laughed at him. Due to this sinful action, I was condemned by the great sage to assume the form of a serpent. One should note here that before being favored by Krishna, a person is always under the modes of material nature, however elevated he may be materially. Vidyadhara was a materially elevated demigod, and he was very beautiful. He also held a great material position and was able to travel all over by airplane. Yet he was condemned to become a serpent in his next life. Any material elevated person can be condemned to an abominable species of life if he is not careful. It is a misconception that after reaching the human body, one is never degraded. Vidyadhara himself states that even though he was a demigod, he was condemned to become a serpent. But because he was touched by the lotus feet of Krishna, he immediately came to Krishna consciousness. He admitted, however, that in his previous life he was actually sinful. A Krishna conscious person knows that he is always the servant of Krishna. He is the most insignificant And whatever good he does is by the grace of Krishna and the spiritual master. So wonderful here. There's lots of wonderful things we can unpack here. The first thing to remember is that we are conditioned by the material modes of nature. And even when we think, oh, I'm a very great devotee because I'm a, like in this case, he was a demigod, but because of his material beauty and his riches, he became very puffed up. Immediately, somebody who comes into this situation and they do not realize and they don't acknowledge the fact that because he is rich and he has these beauties because of the grace of Krishna. Krishna, it's all of Krishna's energy. It's not, none of it is his. In other words, one can be very beautiful, but the beauty fades very quickly. We've known this from cases of very attractive models or movie stars who are just so beautiful, and everybody is beautiful, and then down the line people forget about them because they become old and they're in a wheelchair and they're like, oh, this Elizabeth Taylor or whatever used to be the most beautiful woman, and they're just like, oh, it's very sad because she's ugly now. Or a person may have wealth, but even if they are able to keep their wealth their whole life, it won't bring them any satisfaction, and at the end of death they need to give that up. A person can have wealth and can lose that wealth. But a person who understands that all things are to be used in the service of Krishna, because Krishna is the true enjoyer, as the gopis were saying in this previous story, that Krishna is the only enjoyer. And our job is to give to him, to make ourselves to be enjoyed by him. That's our true happiness. That's our true function. And here in this case, he created a very great offense by insulting the physical looks of the physical body of a great devotee. So this is also a very important point. We should not be seeing the devotee with our material eyes, but with our spiritual eyes. Sometimes a devotee may be, either way, to judge a person as being a pure devotee by, oh, he looks so mystical, he's so beautiful with his bald head or his glowing long hair. And there are so many so-called gurus who take advantage of this. They're very beautiful in features, and they take advantage of their devotees' ignorance and sleep with their disciples and their disciples' wives, and in some cases children, and just horrible things that they do. Similarly, a devotee could be crippled. They could be physically unattractive, but a pure devotee is always a beautiful soul. And a person who has spiritual vision can actually see that. They don't judge them by their physical, so-called ugliness or whatnot. And here, that was because this devotee, Vidyadhara, was a devotee. He was a demigod, and all people are devotees. And because of his attributes, he became puffed up. The ignorance and enviousness, clouded his spiritual vision, so that when he looked at the sage, he could not see that this was a great devotee, and made the offense. But by the grace of Angira, the great sage, he made it so accursed, and of course Krishna, it was actually a blessing in the end. Krishna made it so that he could have the spiritual vision that he should have had. The demigod Vidyadhara continued to speak to Krishna, because I was very proud of the exquisite beauty of my body. He said, I derided the ugly features of the great sage Angira. He cursed me for my sin, and I became a snake. Now I consider that this curse by the sage was not at all a curse. We hear this again and again from the devotees who have the vision. Finally, they realize this was actually a benediction, because I would have been living in a very sinful life for who knows how long in the material world, thinking I'm beautiful and, just being born over and over and over again. Now I consider that this curse by the sage was not at all a curse. It was a great benediction for me. Had he not cursed me, I would not have assumed the body of a serpent, and would not have been kicked by your lotus feet, and thus freed from all material contamination. Krishna is most merciful. He's always his well-wisher of all humanity. And, in somebody who endures suffering, with the goal of, in the end, of coming to Krishna. That's not actually a curse at all. In the material existence, four things are very valuable: to be born in a decent family, to be very rich, to be very learned, and to be very beautiful. These are considered to be material assets. Unfortunately, without Krishna consciousness, these material assets sometimes become sources of sin and degradation. Just like my spiritual master has often said many times, that you can have so many things in material assets, but without Krishna, Krishna is the one at the beginning of all those zeros of material assets. The material assets with Krishna, for the service of Krishna, can become very valuable, extremely valuable. The things that you have that you can serve to Krishna, your assets. But if you're using them for your own glory, they're just a bunch of zeros. They end up being zero. They're always zero. They may give you some happiness, for some fleeting happiness for a short period of time, but they actually end up being a source of misery. These are, unfortunately, without Krishna consciousness, these material assets sometimes become sources of sin and degradation. Despite Vidyadhara as being a demigod and having a beautiful body, he was condemned to the body of a snake due to his pride. A snake is to be the most cruel and envious living entity, as we learned from Agasura and Kaliya, right? But those who are human beings and are envious of others are considered to be even more vicious than snakes. The snake can be subdued or controlled by charming mantras and herbs, but a person who is envious cannot be controlled by anyone. My dear Lord, Vidyadhara continued, now since I have become freed from all kinds of sinful activities, I am asking your permission to return to my abode, the heavenly planet. This request indicates that persons who are attached to fruitive activities desiring promotion to the comforts of higher planetary systems cannot achieve their ultimate goal of life without the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita that the less intelligent want to achieve material benefits and therefore worship different kinds of demigods, but they actually get the benediction from the demigods through the permission of Lord Vishnu or Krishna. Demigods have no power to bestow material profit. Even if one is attached to material benediction, he can worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and ask him. Krishna is completely able to give even material benediction. So this point is already made, like we were saying before. It's not really any point in worshiping demigods, because even if you're worshiping for a material benefit, then, it will, in the end, be rewarded by Krishna only. Dhruva Maharaj worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead for material benediction, but when he actually achieved the favor of the Supreme Lord and saw him, he was so satisfied that he refused to accept any material benediction. He actually felt embarrassed by the whole anger at his stepmother and everything. He felt, what a waste of my time and my energy and everything that I've had the Supreme Lord come before me, and I've wanted this great kingdom, greater than Lord Brahma, The intelligent person does not ask favor from or worship the demigods. He directly becomes Krishna conscious, and if he has any desire for material benefit, he asks Krishna, not the demigods. And okay, we're trying to wrap this up a little bit. Vidyadhara, awaiting permission of Krishna to return to the heavenly planet, said, now because I am touched by your lotus feet, I am relieved from all kinds of material pangs. You are the most powerful of all mystics. You are the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the master of all devotees. You are the provider of planetary systems, and therefore I am asking your permission. You may accept me as a fully surrendered unto you. I know very well that persons who are constantly engaged in chanting your holy name attain release from all sinful reactions, and certainly persons who are fortunate enough to be personally touched by your lotus feet are freed. Therefore, I am sure that I am now relieved from the curse of the Brahmanas simply by being touched by your lotus feet. In this way, Vidyadhara got permission from Lord Krishna to return to his home in the higher planetary system. After receiving this honor, he began to circumambulate the Lord And after offering his respectful obeisances unto him, he returned to his heavenly planet. Thus Nanda Maharaj also became relieved from the imminent danger of being devoured by the snake. All right, this is almost over, so we'll finish the last couple of pages here. The coward men who had come to execute the ritualistic function of worshipping Lord Shiva and Ambika finished their business and prepared to return to Vrindavan. While returning, they recalled the wonderful activities of Krishna. By relating the incident of Vidyadhara's deliverance, they became more attached to Krishna. They had come to worship Lord Shiva and Ambika, but they became more and more attached to Krishna. And this is Krishna consciousness. The more we engage in Krishna consciousness, the more we engage in the service of our spiritual master, the more we engage in the hearing and chanting of Krishna's name, the more we want. It's like an endless feast that we're never satiated, but in a great way. You know, it can be a very similar thing in the opposite way. The more we want to engage, the more we engage in material activities, sex desire, or trying to achieve things materially, the more we are attracted to it. In other words, but it's almost the opposite. In other words, it's kind of like eating something unhealthy that fills you up, but just, what's that, like that C.S. Lewis story, the Turkish delight, makes you feel more and more horrible. It's like you want it more, but you feel like it's draining your body. It drains you of spiritual life, but it becomes you more and more attached into the material world. But when we hear about Krishna, this is the real food. It's the food of life that we hear, and we become enlivened. But we want more from that. We want more in our relationship with Krishna and our spiritual master. So it's very wonderful. So here the same thing. They're talking about Krishna and they're excited by it and they want to hear more and more about it. Similarly, the gopis also worship goddess Katyayani to become more and more attached to Krishna. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that persons who are attached to worship demigods like Lord Brahma, Shiva, Indra, and Chandra for some personal benefit are less intelligent and have forgotten the real purpose of life. As my spiritual master would say, to meditate upon the idea, what is the goal of life? What is your goal of life? You should meditate upon that and think about that. To have love for Krishna. This is the real purpose of life. If we are sitting and we're using religion as a means to try to engage more and more in material enjoyment, then we've missed the boat. We missed the point altogether. And I used to remember, this is a lot of people who are following religion will do this. They see that they can be spiritual or be religious and get the material goodies at the same time. That's what they feel like the point is, either in this life through some material wealth that God gives us as like Santa Claus, or in the next life in heaven, where we get to go to heaven and enjoy in heaven, where the streets are gold and we get all the things that we want. So it's the same selfish kind of desire, and it doesn't really it actually is missing the point of the real purpose of life. The real purpose of our life, the goal of our life, is to remember Krishna, to be in Krishna consciousness, to engage again in the service of our dear Lord Krishna, and remember that. That's something that we eternally do, but we have forgotten. And so it's not like we're trying to attain something. It's just that we are trying to remember and try to re-engage in that. So that is people that Bhaktivedanta says here are not very intelligent because they're given this form of life, and it's almost better to say that the people that are complete atheists and materialists are in a better place because at least they're honest about the situation. They don't believe in God. I don't say it's right, but in a person who is religious but yet using religion as a means to get it's just as bad. So they should realize that it's not the point of God. Point of our life is not for God to be the order supplier for our material enjoyment in either this life or in the next. It's our purpose to remember our service to God, and that in itself will bring us to true happiness and satisfaction. But the coward men, inhabitants of Vrindavan, were no ordinary man. men. Whatever they did for Krishna. That's a good point. If one worships demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to become more attached to Krishna, that is approved, as we've said before. But if one goes to the demigods for some personal benefit, that is condemned. After this incident, on a very pleasant night, both Krishna and his elder brother Balaram, who are inconceivably powerful, went to the forest of Vrindavan. They were accompanied by the damsels of Raja Bhumi, and they began to enjoy each other's company. The young damsels of Raja were very nicely dressed and anointed with pulp of sandalwood and decorated with flowers. The moon was shining in the sky, surrounded by glittering stars, and the breeze was blowing, bearing the aroma of malika flowers. And the bumblebees were mad after the aroma. Taking advantage of the pleasing atmosphere, both Krishna and Balaram began to sing very melodiously. The damsels became so absorbed in their rhythmical song that they almost forgot themselves. Their hair loosened, their dresses slackened, and their garlands began to fall to the ground. At that time, while they were so much absorbed, almost in madness, a demon associate of Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly planets, appeared on the scene. The demon's name was Sankhasura because on his head there was a valuable jewel resembling a conch shell. Just as the two sons of Kuvera were puffed up over their wealth and opulence and did not care for Narada Muni's presence, this Sankhasura was also puffed up over material opulence. So here we go, example again. These people that are in religion, praying for religious wealth. Sometimes it's worse to be a demigod or a son of a demigod because you have such material wealth, you become so arrogant. And we see this time and time again with the people, devotees who are in demigod positions, becoming puffed up and doing demoniac things like this. He thought that Krishna and Balaram were two ordinary cowherd boys enjoying the company of many beautiful girls. There's the envy. He's like, why can't I have beautiful girls? I'm the son of Kuvera and I've got this nice jewel on my head. These two coward boys, it's like, this is the way he's thinking, right? Generally, in the material world, a person with riches thinks that all beautiful women should be enjoyed by him. It's so true. Just turn on the news. Anybody who's like beautiful or movie star, they're just like, oh, I can have any beautiful woman I want, And if they have power, they sometimes do the most horrible things to women. Because they are powerful and they have money and they can do it. He therefore decided to take charge of them. He appeared before Krishna and Balaram and the damsels of Raja and began to lead the girls away from the north to the north. He commanded them as if he were their proprietor and husband, despite the presence of Krishna and Balaram. Being forcibly taken away by Sankhasura, the damsels of Raja began to call the names of Krishna and Balaram for protection. The two brothers immediately began to follow them, taking up big logs in their hands. Don't be afraid, they called the gopis. We are coming at once to chastise this demon. Very quickly, they reached Sankhasura, thinking the brothers too powerful. I love that. It's like, the demons, they think their money and their wealth and their beauty can put them in a completely, like sometimes these people who are, like predators of women and just, force them, I'm going to ruin your acting career for the rest of your life if you don't sleep with me. They have that kind of power, right? But here they're such deep down, they're such little wimps. They have no backbone at all. Once they realize, Shankasura left the company of the gopis and ran for fear of his life. But Krishna would not let him go. He entrusted the gopis to the care of Balaram and followed Sankhasura wherever he fled. Krishna wanted to take the valuable jewel resembling a conch shell from the head of the demon. After following him a very short distance, Krishna caught him, struck his head with his fist, and killed him. He then took the valuable jewel and returned. In the presence of all the damsels of Raja, he presented the valuable jewel to his elder brother Balaram. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 33rd chapter of Krishna, Vidyadhara liberated and the demon Sankhasura killed. So, of course, the takeaway from this is that anybody killed by Krishna is done for the mercy of that living entity. So someone is enviousness. Some demigods he doesn't kill. like Indra or whatever. He just like chastises them. Some he kills, but in those cases, even then, they're liberated from their sinful reactions just by the touch of Krishna. They receive liberation. So Krishna is always very merciful to those who are even acting demonically. What to think of those who love and serve him? How much does that benefit them? So thank you very much. We're going to chant a little bit. Thank you for joining with me. Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Well, thank you very much. We'll see you next time for next story.